समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है, अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है, अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Hello and welcome to a fresh new episode of Geopolitics with Swasti with our consulting editor for Strategic and International Affairs, Swasti Rao, who answers your questions, dear subscribers, on geopolitical developments around the world. Swasti, to begin today, we will start with a question on Su-57, and this is a question by our subscriber Georges Sira, who is asking that why do Indian veterans seem to be pushing for Su-57 even when the IAF walked out of it a few years ago? So how good is it actually, and will it have any chances of getting sold to India later? Moreover, do geopolitical friendships between countries play a role in such kind of deals?
Thank you for that question. I understand where this is coming from. In last few months, there has been a lot of speculation around what kind of a fifth generation fighter should India go for. Should India make its own, which is AMCA? Should India go for, Rafales? Should India go for, although Rafales are 4.5 generation, not fifth generation, should India go for F-35s? Should India go for Su-57s? And that's where the question is coming from. Actually, Devdatta, many from the Air Force community itself, and especially the veterans, have already answered this question, but just because you've asked me, so I'll tell you 4-5 reasons why the Indian Air Force doesn't seem very keen on the Sukhoi 57, despite the fact that you will see that in discussions it keeps figuring again and again. See, one is that we were already a part of the Su-57 program, and for 11 years we negotiated with Russians, and in 2018 we withdrew. Why did we withdraw? We withdrew because we did not like what we saw. And when I say we, it's not me, it's the Indian Air Force, okay? Right. Now you can ask me a question as to what is it that the Indian Air Force did not like. There were a couple of problems. For example, there was a problem with respect to what kind of an engine are they using. There was also a concern on whether or not Russia is going to share that transfer of technology with us or not. So there were TOT considerations. Similarly, there was also this entire issue on how much of dependence will India continue to have for upgradation of those fighters? Because remember that for Sukhoi 30s, Sukhoi 30 MKIs, which is another fighter that we have bought from Russia, for the upgradation of those fighters, we are still very much dependent. Okay, right. So basically the idea is that what kind of an autonomy will India have if India goes in for this program? And finally, that it was not really a stealth, fighter. It was not really a, technically speaking, a fifth generation aircraft. So these were the reasons. And then there were some more reasons, for example, that it was a single seat aircraft, and the Indian Air Force then wanted a dual seat. Okay. Now, these were the reasons because of which the Air Force walked out of it in 2018. The negotiations failed. And after all these years, almost, 4-5 years now, you see it coming back. Now, one thing that you need to keep in mind is that the Russians themselves do not operate a single regiment or a squadron. What we call squadron, they call regiment. So the Russians themselves do not operate a single regiment of the Sukhoi 57s, which means that they are offering us something that they cannot make themselves. Right. So which means there is a problem with respect to scaling. So how will they do it? That's one problem. The second is that the Sukhoi 57 has not really been used so much in the Ukraine war, which means that it is not really battle tested in a way that is satisfactory. That's the second thing. So we do not know how it would really pan out in real battle scenarios. The third thing is that because Russia is getting so dependent on China as a fallout of the Russia's war in Ukraine, and which has been going on for last many years, and I keep repeating all the time that from our perspective, regardless of what happens in Ukraine, which is that whether Russia is able to retain that 20% of land, win some more, lose some more, that is immaterial for us. What really matters to us is that in this process, in this 4-5 year long process, Russia is getting pushed with China in an irreversible and a technical way, by which I mean that, for chips, for, different kind of components, for dual use technology, for many such things. And actually, you can also read my column on the same. But the long and short is that Russia is getting dependent on China. So we frankly do not really have a mechanism to test whether or not the Sukhoi 57 that Russia is offering to us will have Chinese components or not. Because our own Ministry of Defense has time and again been issuing this advisory to our armed forces to cleanse our equipment of Chinese tech. And especially after Operation Sindoor, you can understand that this has taken on a new urgency.
Right.
So these are the reasons. If you put everything together, you understand why the Sukhoi 57, even though they are offering it at a very cheap price. They are also offering, complete TOT. Now they are giving us source code. Back in 2018, they were not giving us source codes. So now they are trying to make us an offer which is very, very attractive. But then the problems remain. The problems that I just listed remain. And that is the reason, and that is my reading, that the Indian Air Force is not very keen on this because the prior experience has not been good.
Right, Swasti. So moving on from that, Ravi Rules has a question on your previous episode, and he points out something that he thinks that you missed, and therefore his question. He says that in the previous assessment of the South Caucasus geopolitics, one key player who was not covered was Pakistan. So now that Pakistan has close ties with Azerbaijan and Turkey, and even during Operation Sindoor, Azerbaijan was overtly pro-Pakistan, where does Pakistan fall into the whole scenario?
That's a good observation, Ravi. And there's a reason why I did not cover it. I'm sure you're referring to my explainer, which I did on how Russia and Azerbaijan are having this fallout. And that is because the entire episode and the explainer was on why there is a fallout between Russia and Azerbaijan. And it was focused on that. And that is why I did not mention Pakistan. Otherwise, of course, it's without a doubt that Pakistan certainly plays an important role when it comes to Azerbaijan. Now, very quickly, yes, first understand that Pakistan, Azerbaijan and Turkey. Okay, these three are called the three brothers. Okay, the three Islamic brothers, and they're always supporting each other. Now, with respect to Pakistan playing a role in the South Caucasus and the conflict, I think one key development which has happened is that Pakistan and Azerbaijan finalized, the purchase of Pakistan-China co-produced J-17 jets. And almost 40-50 of them, which is a big deal. And this was signed sometime in 2024. So naturally, then you see that since these jets are co-produced between Pakistan and China, and I think this deal is finalized at $1.6 billion or something. So that makes Pakistan an important player, in Azerbaijan's defense ecosystem. That's one part. But then there's another part we do not study in India enough, which is that Pakistan, China have common stakes when it comes to, giving the J-17s to Azerbaijan, etc. Similarly, Pakistan and Turkey also have common stakes. In fact, I am of the opinion that if you really want to understand how Pakistan, China, Turkey, in their respective ways are supporting Azerbaijan, you have to see what exactly is common, among these three. And then you will see that even for the J-17s, which are being co-produced between Pakistan and China, a lot of the missiles which are being used are actually Turkish. So a lot of systems are Turkish. In fact, I have done a very good interview with an expert on Turkish and Chinese defense industry, Dr. Ilya Rubanis, and I met him in Armenia, and I found him so knowledgeable that I did an uninterrupted with him. So I urge you to watch it, and he was actually the first one to highlight it with that gravitas, which is that Turkish and Pakistani support to each other is not merely assistance, that Turkey is just providing some assistance to Pakistan. He actually went into the length and breadth of explaining how Pakistan and Turkish defense industries are entwined in a much more technological way. And then he said that, for example, he said that how Azerbaijan has given money to develop the Turkish 5th generation Khan project, how Pakistani engineers are working in the 5th generation Khan project. And when you put all this together, you understand that there is more than what meets the eye. So it is not just focused on South Caucasus or the Armenia-Azerbaijan war, but if you look at the defense industry amalgamation between Turkey, China, and Pakistan, it is not merely about China selling some equipment to Pakistan, or Turkey selling some equipment to Azerbaijan, or Pakistan selling some co-produced equipment to Azerbaijan. It goes deeper. And that is a concern for us, because I am of the opinion that we do not study the systems integration enough. There's one thing called weapon platforms, which is like complete platforms, and there's another thing called systems. So Turkey's defense industry is very adept at developing modular systems that can be fitted into any platform.
Right.
Okay, and that is one of the ways. So it's not just drones, but it's also the systems integration, which Turkish defense industry is very good at. And actually, it kind of comes together in South Caucasus. So thanks for asking me that question. And I will certainly come back to South Caucasus again. And again, from a Indian perspective also, maybe a lot of your questions will be answered then.
Moving ahead, Swasti, our subscriber Georges Sira has a very interesting question on Russia, given that we are discussing so much about Russia. So I'll take that up again. And he says that recently there were news that Russian minister killed himself. There was another news that another one fell off a window. And there are many more such examples, based on which he wants you to explain what is basically happening in the Russian political culture.
So basically what you want to understand is the Russian death syndrome. Actually, there is a lot of work done on that, and don't laugh. It's here in India. It looks very hilarious to us, but actually, it's a very serious problem in Russia. You see, I think that also comes from another gap that in my opinion, exists in the Indian, so to say, understanding of Russia as a state, as a polity, as a culture. We don't really study that enough because our bilateral ties with Russia are friendly, and therefore most of our understanding of Russia comes from there. So it's literature, it's the bilateral ties as Russia support. But if you look inside the character and personality of the Russian state, especially under President Putin, you really see that it has evolved as a kleptocracy. So by kleptocracy, basically one means is that where you see a system where the oligarchs and the businessmen who eventually become oligarchs, okay, are appropriating the state resources in a way that really benefits them personally at the cost of state, okay, and that is something which you will see as a common denominator in most of erstwhile Soviet societies. So it's a very Soviet culture, that there is always this shadow kleptocracy which kind of comes into place, and so that's one part that you have to keep in mind when you want to understand why so many deaths are happening. So quickly, if you ask me to explain this, yes, it is true that though it has a long history behind it, but if you ask me to focus on more contemporary times, you do see that after the war in Ukraine began, which is February 2022, many dissenters, many critics, either of course they left in Russia, the mass exodus has also happened from Russia. We always talk about the Ukrainian refugees, but the fact is that even millions and millions of Russians have left Russia. A lot of working professionals, the technocrats, etc. have left Russia. So that's also there. So either they left Russia, or those that were still living there, and especially the oligarchs that were not very happy with the getting sanctioned as a result of the war, you will see that a whole host of them have been found dead under mysterious circumstances. Several times you will see that they either died by falling off windows, and of course there's in the West, and especially in Ukraine and in East Europe and in Germany, in Brussels, you will see a lot of very satirical pieces written on it as to if you are an oligarch, or if you are the vice president of an oil company, or if you are somebody that is into a hotel business, or if you are into media, better not stand very close to the windows because chances are you might just fall off your balance, etc. So basically the thing to remember here is that yes, it has happened. In fact, there have been at least 11-12 very mysterious deaths that have happened in the same way. So falling off windows is one way. The other very traditional way of the Russian intelligence sort of eliminating their dissenters is also by poisoning them. So you would see that they were poisoned somewhere, and Alexei Navalny, the very well-known opposition leader, was actually poisoned. And all this happens not just inside Russia, but also elsewhere. So there is a very, very wonderful 2022 article published in The Atlantic, where you will see a lot of details of how many Russian dissenters were killed in London while they were jogging, or when they were with their families, etc. In fact, one of them actually died in India, and that was the time when this really caught some public attention as to what really happened. He was here in India, and he was again found dead under mysterious circumstances, and the whole issue was just brushed under the carpet. But frankly, it just connects the dots that you're asking me to connect. So it is there, and this continues even till date. So I think in Putin's Russia, it is not okay to be a dissenter. And if you are one, it is better to leave Russia.
Swasti, moving on from Russia to Africa, because Anubhav Saxena from Bangalore has a question on the African Union. And he asks that how does the African Union work? Is it a similar kind of union like the EU? And then should India start trade talks with EU rather than with each country separately? Is it in India's benefit?
No, it's a very natural question. Actually, I get this question a lot. So interesting. So African Union is basically an intergovernmental organization. It promotes unity. It promotes, democratic institution building. It promotes peace. It also promotes trade. But that's where it ends, frankly, because it, of course, there's more to it. But then in the paucity of time, you can just understand that that's where it basically ends. On the contrary, the European Union is different. European Union, it's a geo-economic bloc, and it is a single market. Okay, and then within the European Union, you also have a customs union. So European Union is something, economically speaking, it is a very advanced kind of a geo-economic bloc, which is frankly unrivaled in the world right now. So the African Union does have something similar. It is called the African Continental Free Trade Area within the African Union, because African Union has about 55 countries. Okay, and India, if you remember, under India's presidency of the G20, the entire African Union became a G20 member. Okay, right. So it sort of operates like that, but when it comes to trading, it doesn't really operate as a one trade bloc. On the contrary, I told you that within that there is a free trade area. And then India and African Union, generally the India and Africa trade has been growing. There's no doubt about it. But African Union by itself doesn't really provide a geo-economic bloc with which India can trade. It doesn't really work as a single market, unlike the European Union. And also because if you look at the African continent, it's so huge that within the African continents, there are multiple, economic communities that India keeps trading with. But to your question, that does it trade in the same way as it does with the EU? There is an inherent difference between how EU operates and between how African Union operates. So one is more political in nature, and it has some tasks, of course, that I told you, but the other is more geo-economic and more legal in nature. So you don't have anything like the European Commission or something that really takes decisions on behalf of the 27 member states when, the geo-economic bloc takes it to a WTO, to etc., etc. You don't really have anything like that.
That was a very comprehensive answer, Swasti. And moving on from Africa, we have a question from Satyapragyan Das on the Palestinian cause. And he asks, what is the future of the Palestinian cause since the two-state solution no longer seems to be a reality?
Actually, I share this concern because India's official position is still a preference for a two-state solution for this problem. I don't really see how this is going to happen because, the only flicker of hope for the Palestinian cause comes from the fact that Saudi Arabia has made it clear that unless and until there is a Palestinian state, they are not going to normalize their relations with Israel.
Right.
Remember that after the Abraham Accords, Israel UAE relations had normalized, but Israel and Saudi Arabia relations were in the process of getting normalized when the Hamas attack had happened and everything went on a back burner. And especially after so much bloodshed in the Middle East, after the Operation Rising Lion and America's intervention and so on and so forth, and all the other things in the 2 years that have happened, by Israel, by way of Israel decapacitating the Hezbollah leadership and eliminating Hamas and weakening Iran, etc. The Saudis have made this statement. So I'm not sure to what extent whether this is going to happen or when is this going to happen. So right now, I honestly cannot really tell you a timeline of what happens to the Palestinian cause.
Right. And with that, I think you also answered his second question, which is on how is this going to impact other Arab plus North African states, which we just discussed.
If you look at it from the perspective of other Muslim states in the region, of course, there is a Shia-Sunni divide, etc. And they keep competing for influence and all that. I mean, I don't have the time to get into the Middle Eastern politics, which is so disturbed. But what I want to say is that there is a balance of power. Okay. Now, what has happened in the last 2 years is that balance of power has got significantly weakened. And there has been a marked rise of Israel. Okay. Now, the other Middle Eastern countries would also want to balance that, right? So, what I'm saying is that while we hear it pretty clearly from Saudi Arabia, there are also others, maybe Jordan and all these countries, that still support the creation of a independent Palestinian state. But considering the situation on the ground, I'm not sure if there is a timeline to it, and that is what I was wanting to highlight. So we don't know. I mean, anything that we talk about right now is purely speculative.
Right.
So we can probably come back to it if we see anything which is on the ground, which is indicating on something more tangible. Right now, I don't really see anything.
With that, Swasti, we come to our last question, and it's of course on Trump. And this is from Aditya18893, a subscriber, who asks that, do you think Donald Trump is overdoing this tariff thing and that he doesn't realize that this thing will ultimately hit the American economy? Also, what impact do you think Elon Musk's political party, which is the American Party, will make in the American politics?
Now, first of all, I think thanks for helping us maintain this consistency, because there has never been a GPS without Donald Trump. So,
Absolutely.
just as we were thinking that this GPS is going to conclude without a Donald Trump, there comes Trump again. Now, of course, it is already hitting America's economy. It's just that this remains a very popular narrative in the Rust Belt. This remains a very popular narrative among MAGA supporters, and therefore Trump seems pretty unfazed. Is he overdoing the tariffs bit? Of course. I think even this is an understatement, because this is Trump's style to sort of create as much psychological pressure as he can and then ultimately walk away with something and then to hold it up as a victory. I urge you to also watch the latest worldview that I have done with former advisor to Donald Trump. So he's a big deal, actually. His name is George David Banks. He's not only been former advisor to Donald Trump in the first administration, but he's also been advisor to George Bush administration, and he was honored during Obama administration. So he's somebody who's seen the successive US presidencies unfold in a very changing world order, and he's himself a huge critic of how wavered are Trump's tariff policies. But it's just that it's like he's keeping at it because the electorate sort of still supports him. Okay. Otherwise, the stock market doesn't like it. The American defense industries don't like it. The way the Europeans are cancelling American defense industry orders and turning to their own, nobody is liking it. There's so much unpredictability. Markets do not like this unpredictability. India is not liking it. I mean, this constant theatrics and this drama that Donald Trump creates around his decisions, this flippy-floppy nature of whether he wants to, be on this side, on the other side. It's not just India. You pick up South Korea, you pick up Japan. He is ruining his ties with all of them. Okay. But at the same time, because America continues to be the world's biggest, economy and military right now, everybody has little choice but to accommodate as much as they can and sort of appease Donald Trump as much as they can. We are ourselves, by the way, waiting. I don't know by the time the GPS is going to be out whether we will receive our letter or not, but we are also waiting for what that love letter contains.
With that, Swasti, we come to an end of this episode. As always, dear viewers, we look forward to your questions for another episode next week. Until then, stay tuned. Thank you.
Thank you.